Hello and welcome to the second video of this devlog where I will be trying to make a survival style game in GameGuru Max. So I want to show you guys around and just talk about some of the things that I've been doing over the last couple of weeks. It's by no means done. There's going to be a long process to kind of create this, but I'll show you what I've done so far. It's not perfect, but it's a place to start. So as you can see, I've gone through the entire cave and I've added a lot of rocks and debris. I've added some stalactites here. And there's also areas where there's grasses and some more debris, rocks and things like that there. And here, anytime you see this kind of rock, I'm really attempting to cover some seams because the way this is constructed, each piece has, is connected to one another and there's like seams in between. And so let me see if I can get to a place where I'll just run. I'll get to a place where I can point out kind of like an obvious seam and what I did to try to solve for that. So here's a good example where it's still not perfect. Still need to go through and fix some things up, but you can see the seam right there. Now that doesn't look too terrible, but it's, when you see that a lot, it becomes pretty obvious. And so I tried to go through and cover those up as best I could. I think I did better in other areas than this. I'll probably come and revisit this, and then obviously I've got to fix the alignment on this dirt here because it's hovering above. Not easy, especially when the pieces don't line up. It's funny, I was talking to Wizardvid, who is the creator of the cave DLC that I'm using for this, and he pointed out that if you set the grid to 300 units, then all of these pieces will seamlessly just snap to one another. And there's even these riser blocks, which I'm using elsewhere to help you with elevation. But as I pointed out to him, there's only one piece that allows for a change in elevation, which I'll show you guys in a little bit. And so I've kind of had to improvise in certain areas where I wanted there to be a difference in the way that the elevation works. But you can see I've also added some grass, and again, really just kind of initial throwing it in there to see how it looks sort of thing. I'll probably fix that up a little bit, make it a little bit nicer. And I've added some other interesting features and rocks along the way, just peppered them through. It took hours to go through piece by piece and add all these rocks and all these details. And like I said, they're still not perfect, as you can see. So lots to do still on that end. Here's another good example of the seams where basically I just took rocks and filled in the cracks. So hopefully it's not as evident that these are two pieces that are coming together at a seam, that it's, as you're walking through, you're not really focused on something like that. I also added some iron nodes. I'm not sure if I can find them. This place is actually a lot bigger than I realized when I put it together. I wanted to make a good sized level, but oh my gosh, I mean, look at this. Look how big the inside of this one cavern is, right? And I don't know just how much space there is, but if you consider that I'm taking up half of the map, there's probably, here's a good iron node. It's getting late now, but see, there's a little iron node. So that'll be a resource that we can collect from. Obviously the day-night cycle is in place, so you can see the diagnostic showing on the left-hand side. And right now the time is ticking away, and it's now getting to be 7 o'clock, so it's getting dark in the cave. You do have a flashlight with you. You're a experienced hiker after all, so you have a flashlight and you're able to get around with that, but you don't need it during the daytime. I also have a compass because, again, if you're a hiker, generally speaking, you're going to have a compass with you. But I thought the day-night cycle really worked well with this, and there's a couple of places where you can see the sky through the top because there's like openings in the ceiling of the cave, and so you'll be able to see that day-night cycle play out. I also took great pains to make sure that the sun was actually going in the right direction. And I credit Necrum for the assistance on this because I was having a time of it trying to figure out exactly how to get the sun to rise in the east and set in the west. It seems like that's just not normally what it does, at least according to the compass. Bear in mind that the sun in the environment is independent of the compass, right? So in other words, it's not like the two things were built for one another, right? The compass and indeed the nav bar also came well after the fact. But Necrum accounted for this in the behavior. And in fact, let me show you. I'm just going to press escape and come out of here. Oh, it's awfully dark. Bear with me a moment. Let me fix that. Okay, that's a bit better. Let me show you the day-night cycle just to refresh your memory in case you haven't seen the day-night video or you just don't recall. There's a great many uh, parameters in this behavior, and there's actually even a couple of new ones to be aware of, but which we're not going to go over because it's not a behavior video. But suffice it to say that there are parameters in here that can be adjusted to make sure that the sun is going the way you need it to go. And I say that because, not everybody's making an earthbound game. Some people are making a game that is on a different planet. Maybe the sun goes in a different direction. Who knows? So the more options and flexibility, the better. But all we really needed to do, the default pitch, sun pitch, was 70, and it was rising roughly in the west. And so we switched that to -70, and lo and behold, rose in the east. So that's all we needed to do. So once you know what to do, it's not too bad. But I had a hell of a time of it trying to figure that out. And then I got Necrum's help, and he was so kind to assist me with that after he refreshed his own memory, because it's probably been a while since he actually wrote that script. All right, so we did some decorations, stalactites, rocks, iron node, grasses, day and night cycle, like I mentioned, and the compass. So the compass just sitting here. And I'm going to be using these riser blocks that come with the DLC to hold on to some of the more global scripts so that I can find them when I need them again. So anything that's global is going to go outside here and hold on to those global scripts for me. So they're all in one place and I know just where to find them again. So then I worked on planning. So there is so much to cover in even a simple survival game that I honestly didn't even realize that was going to come up. For example, if we look at my resource sheet, I started thinking about crafting. I started thinking about, well, they'll be able to craft, food and weapons and tools and camp supplies, things like that, medical supplies, etc. But what I realized is that when you're working with something like this where there's resources involved, you kind of have to think backwards, right? So you can't just throw in a bunch of resources, say rocks and metal and so on and so forth, and then pepper in the crafting system, because then you're likely going to have to spend a lot of time dialing that back and dialing that in and making sure that you get the balance right. And even if you plan a lot like I'm doing, you're still probably going to have to do a lot of work on balance. And so it's probably better to take a step back, think through this and ask yourself, okay, well, how many rocks do I need to make a campfire, right? And what am I going to use in the campfire as a resource to start it, and how abundant are those resources? How much time am I going to be spending looking for those resources? If I want to make an iron pickaxe, how many iron ingots do I need, and how do I smelt those iron ingots, the raw iron into iron ingots and so on. So a lot of planning. And you can see I've got a whole list of items here that I'm planning. I'll probably come up with a few more in the meantime, but for right now, this is a good list, especially because I'm not trying to make a fully fledged commercial game. It's really more demo size. So I can imagine that the scale and complexity on a commercial game would probably be far, far greater. And so I've learned a lot. I've learned a great deal already from this experience, just thinking all this through. Some of the other things I've done is I've spent a lot of time watching YouTube videos. I've been watching actual spelunking videos so I can understand things, details that are really important, right? So like, for instance, when you talk about stalactites and stalagmites, and how they look and how they're organized, when I get to a point where I'm adding in the mushrooms, I want to make sure that the mushrooms are growing in the right spots, right? Because their location matters. It's if we have visible line of sight on the sun going east to west, then we should see plants like leafy green plants growing, in the sunlight, and we should see mushrooms growing in the shaded parts. And so knowing which direction the sun was going was critical to making sure that I planned the flora out correctly. Same thing with like source photos. I spent a lot of time on Google Images, looking for the inside of caves to try to find some source images that I liked that it kind of gave me some inspiration. I'm also considering doing a trip to a nearby cave. So actually physically going to a actual cave in my area and walking around. And again, just kind of drawing inspiration, but also just gathering information and details and data from that experience. There's also been some challenges that have come up as I started thinking through and planning this process. I realized that there are a couple of problems that exist within Max today that I'll need to overcome. Now, these things may not always be issues, but right now, trying to build a game like in this style in Max in today's environment, the challenges are going to come up. They do exist. And so knowing what those challenges are ahead of time and thinking through how you're going to deal with those is important. So for instance, let's take a look at the layout of the cave structure, right? So I'm just going to zoom out here. Here's our starting point. We're starting at kind of an elevated location and we're kind of moving down in elevation. But the water plane comes from the terrain down here, that little black and white checker pattern. That's where the water would come up out of. So I can't have water down at that level because I have lava down at that level. That wouldn't work. So I needed a place to have water that's accessible to the players so that they can drink, but it can't be at the terrain level. So how do I get water in the level? Now, those that have watched the first video kind of probably know, especially if they watched all the way through, probably already know how I'm going to do that, but I'll just kind of spoil it here in case you haven't seen that or in case that you just don't recall. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to flood the entire level with water up to a certain point. So I don't remember the exact number. I'll probably have to go back and try to remember what the number is, but ultimately the water plane will come in right here. And this chamber will be mostly flooded, including this tunnel here will be flooded. And the player will have to swim through, trying to do this gently because it doesn't take much to go bloop. But anyways, and then this elevates right up here and they come back out of the water and there might be some goodies back this way. And that'll give them access to water. And the way that's going to work essentially is there will be a trigger zone, probably somewhere in this neck of the woods, that when you enter it, it'll flood the entire level so that by the time you get down this tunnel and around this corner, the water's there. And then when you come back out that same direction, because I know which path the player is going to take, they're going to hit that trigger zone, that water's going to go away. So by the time they make their way all the way down to where the lava is, it's far gone. So that's the way I'm going to handle water. So from the player's perspective, the water's always there in that area, and they don't realize that the water's coming and going as they're triggering it, walking through that tunnel. So that's problem one solved. Mostly credited to Necrom. He kind of gave me the original idea, and then I've worked out like where to put it and all that. So really good idea for that. There are two other challenges that have come up so far that aren't as easy to solve for. And to be honest with you, I haven't solved one of them yet. But we'll talk about the first one that I did. I did come up with a solution for. It's not perfect. It's not ideal, but it's just going to have to do. So note that weapons and tools and gear, things that you have, don't have a health, right? The items themselves don't have any way that through code we can degrade them. So in other words, if I have a pickaxe and I'm using that pickaxe all the time, one would expect that tool to get worn over time and the health to diminish to the point where it breaks and you have to repair it or you have to make a new one. There is no way for us to monitor the health of an item and wear it down over time and break it and have to make a new one like that. Not like you would see in some other kinds of survival style crafting games. So I thought about this for a long time because I was honestly really concerned. And the reason this is so important, just before I reveal what the solution is in a game like this, you don't know how the player is going to play. There are many different play styles. You have to kind of account for people that are very task oriented, just trying to escape, people that are just kind of living the experience and exploring around the cave and trying different things and taking their time with it and everything in between. So, assuming that the player is going to be spending a great deal of time in this cave trying to figure out what to do and how to do it, and crafting things along the way, you essentially have to add in some grind, right? And that grind, if you've ever played a survival game, I play a lot of them. Grind is a huge part of survival games, and some people complain about it. Personally, I find that the grind is the game, right? It really is, because if you could just get everything right away, the game would be over and you'd be out, right? So the grind is the game. And without that ability to add in that grind, I have to find another way to make resources more valuable and a reason to craft and keep crafting. So what I came up with was a tier system. I haven't dialed this in exactly. I don't have all the answers for everything, but I'll just give you an example of, like, we can say like the Bone Club and the Stone Club, for example. Right now I have marked as tier 1, tier 2. I think I will probably go and try to find a wood club as well and make the wood club tier 1 and then the bone club tier 2 and the stone club tier 3. So the idea would be that you can't craft the tier 2 or tier 3 items without the tier 1 items. So you get the tier 1 item and then you're able to craft the tier 2 item using the tier 1 item as a resource, essentially, and level up from there, upgrade it basically. And that way there's a continual grind, continual need to go and gather additional resources, and a benefit to doing so, because if the bone club hits just as hard as the wood club, then why build a bone club? You've already got the wood club and it does the exact same thing. So you really just have to have some incentive, and some reason to continue to grind and continue to achieve. And then the last problem that I've come across that I don't quite know how to solve is that there right now there is no way to drop items from a creature, right? So if we go back to our little cave here, let's just go into this white space. I'm going to brighten this up a little bit so we have a little bit more light to see with. Let's just go midday. So it doesn't really matter if I choose a sewer rat or a mole rat. At the end of the day, there is no way for me to drop items off of these creatures when they die, because they're going to be cloned. So in other words, if there was just one instance of a mole rat, for example, or if I were to pepper in a whole bunch of mole rats and set item drop behavior on the mole rat, then the item can drop from the mole rat. But once the mole rat is dead, it's dead. It's not coming back. And that's not what we really want. In a survival game, again, we go back to grind. We have a need to continuously eat to keep up our health and our strength. But we need proteins and we need vegetables and so on and so forth. So these rats will need to spawn. They'll need to be cloned, and there's no way to drop the item off of the creature, and item drop does not work on a cloned entity. So that is a problem that I have not yet solved. I've put a report in to like a GitHub report in for this, but it's a feature request. So as we all know, feature requests are not prioritized right now. Lee is really focused on getting the bug count down as low as possible and trying to achieve version 1. And I don't expect this problem to go away soon. But I'm hopeful that if I'm patient enough, then it will eventually get worked out. So in the meantime, I'm choosing to set it aside. I'm choosing to go forward with the development of the game, and just noting that this is a potential problem with no immediate solution that I'll have to try to figure out. So one alternative might be maybe there are no rats. Maybe the player needs to survive off of something else like mushrooms, like grasses, I don't know, whatever the player can find. I can figure those things out if and when the need arises. So I'm not going to worry about it, and it's not going to stop me from continuing on with the project, but it is something to overcome. But that's it. That's what I have for you today. So far in the journey of creating a survival game from scratch using GameGuru Max. Like I said, I expected this project to be very challenging, but I think it'll also be enlightening for a lot of us to know, where are our limitations today and what can we do to think strategically and creatively to sometimes work around those problems, and also when we can just accept those problems and maybe just push past them despite them. I hope you enjoy the video so far. Be sure to click the like button down below if you did. If you have any ideas or suggestions for some of the challenges that I've mentioned, or even some of the items that might be crafted or might be included in the game, feel free to leave a comment down below. I'll take any suggestion. I may not incorporate it, but I'll consider it for sure. If you're new here, welcome. We're in the middle of a series here, so be sure to go back and watch the first videos so you're up to speed on what we're doing here. And then be sure to click the bell icon so that you can follow along on future videos. The pace of these videos is probably going to be pretty slow. It's really just going to be as I have something to show you, I'll show you it. But that's it. Thanks so much for watching all the way through, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now. Hey, don't forget there's a written guide for every behavior, including ones I haven't yet covered on this channel. And if you want to learn some more, why don't you check out this video next.